Tom's neighborhood was like something out of a postcard. Pristine lawns, picket fences, and the kind of tranquility that almost begged to be interrupted. It was the sort of place where everyone knew each other by name, and Sunday barbecues were a weekly event. But there was one exception: Mrs. Roberts. She lived alone in the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, a quaint, slightly run-down Victorian that had seen better days. Mrs. Roberts was an elderly woman, reclusive and quiet, with few visitors and even fewer conversations with her neighbors. Tom had always found her to be kind, if somewhat distant. She was the kind of person who waved hello but never stopped to chat. It was as if she was part of the neighborhood, but never really belonged to it. Tom hadn't thought much about Mrs. Roberts until one day, in the middle of summer, when he noticed that her mailbox was overflowing with letters and flyers. It was strange because Mrs. Roberts was always meticulous about her mail. She would collect it every morning like clockwork, shuffling down her front steps in her worn slippers and floral housecoat. As days passed and the pile of mail grew, Tom began to worry. He realized he hadn't seen Mrs. Roberts in nearly a week. Her house remained eerily quiet, and her once perfectly tended garden had started to wilt and overgrow. It wasn't just the absence of activity that was troubling, it was the sense of something being very wrong. Tom decided to check on her. It seemed like the right thing to do, and besides, he figured it would ease his growing unease. He walked up to her door, knocked a few times, and waited. Nothing. He knocked again, louder this time, but still no response. He called out her name, listening for any signs of movement inside the house, but the only sound was the distant chirping of birds in the late afternoon sun. Feeling a bit more worried now, Tom tried the door. It was unlocked, which struck him as odd. Mrs. Roberts was always careful to lock up. It was one of the few things she seemed obsessive about. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air inside the house was stale and musty, as if it had been shut up for days. Dust motes floated lazily in the streams of sunlight that filtered through the curtains. The house was eerily silent, save for the creaking of the wooden floorboards beneath Tom's feet. "Mrs. Roberts?" Tom called out, his voice echoing faintly through the house. No answer. He made his way through the living room, noting the untouched furniture, the old-fashioned decor, and the framed photographs on the walls. Everything seemed frozen in time. The kitchen was much the same, clean but with a layer of dust that suggested it hadn't been used in days. A cup of tea sat on the table, long cold, with a thin film forming on the surface. Tom's anxiety grew as he moved deeper into the house. He checked the downstairs bathroom, the small study, and finally, the stairs leading to the second floor. He hesitated at the bottom, listening intently for any sounds from above, but there was nothing. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. Steeling himself, Tom ascended the stairs, each step creaking loudly in the stillness. The upstairs hallway was dimly lit, with several closed doors leading to what he assumed were bedrooms and a bathroom. He walked to the first door and pushed it open. It was a bedroom. Likely Mrs. Roberts, judging by the feminine touches, the floral bedspread, the delicate lace curtains, and the perfume bottles on the dresser. The bed was neatly made, but there were no signs of recent use. No clothes left out, no books on the nightstand. It was as if the room had been untouched for years, rather than days. The next room was much the same, neat, tidy, but devoid of life. The bathroom offered no clues either. Tom was growing increasingly frustrated and anxious. Where was she? Finally, he came to the last door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, and as Tom pushed it open, he felt a cold draft brush past him. The room was a small, sparsely furnished guest bedroom. There was nothing unusual about it except for the window, which was wide open, letting in the cool evening breeze. Tom walked over to the window and looked out. The backyard was empty, the garden overgrown with weeds. Beyond that was a thick line of trees that marked the edge of the neighborhood. There was no sign of Mrs. Roberts. He was about to close the window when something caught his eye. On the windowsill, partially hidden under the curtain, was a piece of paper. It looked old, yellowed with age, and it was folded neatly. Tom picked it up and unfolded it, revealing a short, hastily scrawled note in shaky handwriting. "They come at night. I can't escape them. I can't leave. If you find this, don't stay. Don't let them know you're here.